everybody. Welcome to the Lions Roar podcast. We are back again with more intriguing conversations for pioneers and entrepreneurs who want to just know a little bit more and get a little bit more inspired. Today, we are talking about entrepreneurship and the church, and how do they relate? Can they work alongside each other? Do they understand each other? I've got my guests today. I've got Gary Spicer and Shell Perris, and let's just get into it. Are you ready? Okay, guys, so this is a really big topic and one that we entrepreneurs love to debate about. Are entrepreneurs understood in the church?
No. I mean, I've been a pastor for 35 years, and I think we have dishonoured, not affirmed, not confirmed. We've wanted their checkbook, but not the person. And I think that we really, I know it sounds strong, but just have used them for what we wanted to do. You know, entrepreneurs are people, first and foremost, obviously. They're skillful people, they're resourceful people. They think out the box. And I think for most ministers, they're threatened by them.
Right.
And I think, you know, I understand, you know, that entrepreneurs, pioneers don't need to go and attack the pastor or, you know, tell him how to do his job. But I really do think there should be better relationships built with the leaders of churches and those who are pioneers and entrepreneurs, and not always expect them, you know, the pastors expect them to do what they want them to do. I think we've got to really build a partnership with creative thinkers like pioneers and entrepreneurs, because they can think out the box, they can create resource, they can say how to do things a different way. And I think the problem probably is that, you know, most leaders need to be a little bit more secure. And then I think we could really have combustion, if I'm honest, because I think they're a gift to the church. I think in the fivefold ministry gift, we would, if they were just doing what we call church work, we'd call them apostles.
Right.
And I think many of them are apostles in the marketplace. And some may disagree with me on that, but I actually think they are. And I think if they're apostles in the marketplace, which is where we should be as a church reaching, teaching, ministering to, I think they've got a lot to offer.
Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting. Me and my family moved to a new place after being in one place for a long, long time. And we wanted to find a church to be part of. And it took ages. And the reason it took ages was because every single church that we went to, the first thing that they would say is, "Oh, Shell Parish, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do our kids' work, you can lead worship," all these different things. And I thought, I'm not here because I want to do all of those things. I just want to be in a church. And once I've got established in that church, then I'll look at where I can fit.
Yeah.
But because people knew that I was a leader, knew that I had that kind of entrepreneurial, passionate spirit within me, straight away it was about what I could do.
Right.
And it just switched me off.
Yeah.
I was like, why would I want to be a part of a church where what I do is more important than who I am as a person?
That's a great point.
And actually now I'm in a church with my family where we've been part of that church for 6 months and nobody's asked us to do anything.
Right.
And there's been a real kind of, we've just been able to be and just get to know people, and have actually really enjoyed being unseen for the first time in a long time that I've been part of a church. And that's when you realise you're part of a church because of who you are, not because of what you can bring to the table.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons with that church is also that there are a number of entrepreneurs and pioneers in that church too.
Yeah, there's a culture.
And there's a culture of that, you know. I mean, actually, it was a church I pioneered but don't lead now. But it was really important that we make space for those people.
Yeah.
And yeah, as Shell said, you know, sometimes they're the people we go straight to do our ministries.
Yeah.
Or to fill our gaps. And you know what? They can do it, but it may not be their right place. And again, I think they're great people to create the marketplace for the church, how to touch the marketplace, how to, you know, minister into the marketplace. Because sometimes churches don't even know how to do that. And look, I am totally for church. You know, I would have been a pastor for 35 years. I enjoyed all my time pastoring 2 churches, actually. And in those moments, you know, it's just like you do need resource.
Yeah.
You do need people. But I think sometimes we're so desperate for people, we put round pegs in square holes.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why they get frustrated. And I think, you know, a leader needs to be a much better, what I call talent spotter. You know, what is their gift? How can we fit them in that benefits them? and also benefits the church and its mission.
Yeah.
And I think if churches were a little bit more outward looking,
Yeah.
I think more entrepreneurs would be going to that church.
Yeah. Do you think church leaders actually fully understand entrepreneurship? Is that part of it as well?
Not always. I think some do, but I think some really don't. I think I've told the story before about, being part of a church, and I talked about, doing this big event for 9,000 kids, and the response that came was, "You're never going to do that. How's that ever going to happen?" It was just doom and gloom from the word go.
Yeah.
And you just think, oh my goodness, I'm strong enough and been a leader long enough for that not to bother me. But for somebody who's just starting out, who's got a dream and an idea that wants to do something great for God, somebody says that to you, it can be so damaging.
Yeah.
And we don't want to feed things that aren't, you don't want to tell somebody that they're great at doing something if they're not. We're not saying lie to people, but we've got to have that spirit of encouraging people, of walking alongside people, of encouraging them to be everything that God's created them to be, even if that's different from what we know or experience.
Yeah.
Even if you're not a pioneer, or you're not an apostle, or you're not a leader or an entrepreneur, that doesn't mean that you can't get alongside somebody and champion them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just really important. We're not saying anyone's better, whether if they're pioneers and entrepreneurs, doesn't mean they're better than anyone else serving in the church, but it is putting people in the right place. And I think that entrepreneurs and pioneers want space. They need space to think, to create. And if we think as church leaders, we're the only creator of vision, I think we're really missing something. And it's been always my joy to see people create from the pew, not just from the pulpit, and to be able to channel that vision to complement the bigger vision of what God's called us to do. And I think that way you get really resourced people. You get greater giving, generosity. I remember challenging a number of entrepreneurs who, were doing well financially. And I said, I appreciate you giving to the local church, tithing and offerings. I said, but I know you're making profits in your company. They said, yeah. I said, how can we release some of that into the kingdom, the marketplace, evangelism, something that really touches the people of this city? And you know what? They started to light up.
Yeah.
They started to light up. See, big thinkers want a big vision. And I'm not saying churches don't have a big vision, but we've got to scratch where they're itching. And they itch cities, they itch towns, they itch nations.
Yeah.
They itch the world. And depending on their resource, we've got to kind of like tap vision into them that absolutely complements the church, but we can't always control them. And we've got to trust them. So we build relationship together.
Yeah.
And then that becomes resourceful. So I do also think, in this nation over, I don't know, maybe the last 50, 70 years, we've only ever trained pastor teachers to lead churches.
Right.
Now, pastors are one of the fivefold ministry gifts. Teachers are too. But both of them aren't breakthrough people. Both of those gifts are not breakthrough. They are containing. One grows the people through the word, and that's really important. One looks after the people, that's really important. But there's nothing about breakthrough about either of those things. So it is more the prophetic, the evangelist, and the apostle that are breakthrough ministries. And again, I think we've got marketplace apostles sitting in all of our churches, and I don't know why we can't legitimize them, affirm them, and release them and let them go.
I think that's the key word, is release. So our strapline as the Lions is release impossibility. And my experience of church sometimes, not actually now, but in the past, has been that some church leaders are more bothered about holding on to people than releasing people.
Yeah.
So they want to hold on to people to feed their ministry and to feed their congregation and to feed their community, but they don't want to release people into the God-given dreams that God's put in their hearts, because that means that it might take them away from feeding into the community. And I think it's a balance. Interestingly, in a church where I do feel people are released, I want to be at church more.
Right.
So I want to be part of that church, there on a Sunday morning, more involved than I ever have done, because it's a release in church.
Yeah.
Whereas churches that want to hold on to people and stop people from flying, I don't want to be there as much. I don't want to get up on a Sunday morning and go to that church, because it's not a place where I feel like I'm going to be able to do what God's called me to do.
Yeah.
And I get that, being part of a church is It's being part of a family. It's being part of a community. It's showing up. It's, you know, it's all those things as well. But it's equally about releasing people to be everything that God's created them to be.
Yeah.
In the generation we live, we need a reformation and a revival. Most people watching this would understand, you know, where we need to change your heart. I mean, this nation and other nations are going down the drain. Values are going, hope's going. All the good things that we may have been brought up with or took for granted are gradually eroding. And so if the church needs to get out of survival mode and into revival mode.
Right.
Now, if we're just waiting to God to bring revival, we're missing the point. God starts revival in a man and woman's heart. They start to believe for the impossible and make it possible.
Yeah.
They start to believe for the unexpected, the kind of visions that people haven't dreamed about, radical visions. But they still need to be attached to a church. I mean, you know, I'm totally a church man. So they need to be attached without, as like Shell said, without being controlled.
Yeah.
They need to be released and celebrated without, you know, everything has to cross the T and dot the I. I'm not sure when Jesus, you know, ministered on this planet with his disciples that they really crossed the T's and dot the I's. You know, they were led by the Holy Spirit. They just went for it.
Yeah.
And we know the early apostles did too. So I think, you know, in this day and age, we really need to wake up and say, yeah, we need to pray for revival, but also we need to look at what God's put before us and start to release, affirm, and go, you know, some of these people could very be the trailblazers for the next revival in Great Britain. And I think pastors and leaders have a massive responsibility for that, not just to contain what they've got, not just to look after what they've got, not just say, I'm not doing well, I've got 200 people, I've got whatever.
Yeah.
You know, we've got 70 million in this country. You know, it's reckoned, you know, people say, oh, we're 5-6% Christian. I doubt that. If we're on about, you know, born again, spirit-filled, redeemed people, you know, it's probably as low as 2-3%. Now, God can do a lot with 2 or 3%. But we need some trailblazers. And I believe pioneers and entrepreneurs sitting in our pews are waiting for leaders to light the fire in them, to legitimise kingdom building, not just business building.
Yeah, that's a really good point, isn't it?
Yeah. I think what you mentioned about before as well, about being secure as a leader, you know, like I have got to that point in my life where I want to see people go further and faster than me.
Right.
You know, I want to see people be greater. I want to see people be better. I want to see, you know, it's like, but it does take a lot. It takes a lot to get to that point because, you know, in my younger years, I might have seen somebody going further and faster than me and thinking, hang on a minute, you know, and comparison creeps in and you think you've got to keep up and all those things. But even with the Lions now, it's the greatest joy in the whole world to see people becoming everything that God's created them to be and doing their thing, being in their zone and doing it really well. You know, if I see somebody doing something that's half-hearted and mediocre, I'm not really interested, to be honest. I want to see people who are doing things really, really well. And it does take a strong leader to be able to release that kind of possibility and potential in people.
Yeah. And the people that are coming to the Lions, the people that you're accepting onto the course, the entrepreneurs, the pioneers, do they come with this common problem that their church doesn't understand them, doesn't support them, doesn't know how to fit them in the box? Is that a common trait?
It is a common trait. I would say 80%.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, really, because the Lions is not a church.
No.
We're an equipping, releasing, extra church. We're not church.
No.
And so we need the churches to wake up because every one of these Lion delegates either belong to a church and they need to be to get on the Lions course.
Yeah, we put a really strong emphasis on that. So we always ask for references because we want to know that these guys are rooted in church, local church. Yeah. We want their pastors and church leaders to be supporting them as they're on the Lions journey. So that is actually really important to us.
I was just going to say that. But thanks, Shal. The whole point, though, is that belonging to church is really important. We're not competing with church. We want church to wake up.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that as a church, an ex-church leader, they need to wake up because sometimes we're praying for something that's right before us.
Yeah.
And we don't see it.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, I need good people. I need strong people. Lord, I need people that start to have the faith that I've got. They're there.
Yeah.
But as Shell says, they could be very well people that threaten you because they're gonna challenge. That's the way they live. That's why they're not the status quo.
Yeah.
And I just think that we're on a precipice, I believe, in this country. I do believe of reformation and revival, but we've got to breathe hope, not just hope, but affirmation and confirmation to these guys. So, as Shell said, they enjoy church, but they're not restricted by church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That the ministers enjoy what they do outside the walls of the church, celebrate it as much as the faithful children's worker, the faithful youth worker. I'm not belittling those people because we need those people.
Of course.
But there are some people sitting in our pews that actually could be very breakthrough people for our city and town that we're just not affirming because it might just threaten me.
Yeah. I think it's that sense of breathing life. It's breathing life into people. You know, if you imagine a balloon is kind of, you know, it's shapeless, isn't it? It's just kind of, it's nothing really until you've breathed air into it, until you've breathed that sense of life into it. And then it becomes the balloon that it was always created to be.
Yeah.
And it's the same with people in church. It's the same with people in general. You've got to breathe that sense of life into them so that they can become everything that some people might think is impossible, but is actually possible. You know, you think about Ezekiel 37 and the valley of the dry bones.
Yeah.
You know, it's just this valley full of dry bones that some people might look at and think, well, there's no life here. You know, they're just dead bones kind of lying there. But then the Holy Spirit comes and breathes life into them and starts to put flesh on them and grows muscles in them. And they become this, you know, kind of so much more than you initially thought they might be.
Yeah.
There's a fantastic book called You See Bones, I See an Army. And it's based on Ezekiel 37. And it's that sense of, you know, some people might see death, but actually you breathe life into it and all of a sudden they become alive. And I mean, there's no limit.
I want the Holy Spirit to breathe some helium into the balloons so they can fly.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, absolutely, I agree with what Shell's saying for a change. But but the whole point is, just think, if we put helium and they just floated, they just flew.
Yeah.
We need people to fly. I don't mean literally, but just to feel no restriction.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, in the Western world, there's too many. And it's not all the pastor's fault. Sometimes people go a maverick. I don't want mavericks. You know what I mean? I want visionary people. Maverick means you're not going to be anchored anywhere. My idea is better than yours. So I believe totally in submission, but I don't want leaders thinking they can control people. But if the pastors and the leaders could start to think, if I got some helium into those people and just let it go, not with a string, where would they fly and how would God use them? And even if they flew away, I can tell you now, the local church would still benefit because God wouldn't see them by.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good.
I think if you flip it as well, because I know obviously we're talking a lot about church leaders and maybe some of the difficulties that some church leaders have with, you know, housing entrepreneurs. I think when you are a leader or a pioneer or an entrepreneur within a church, you also have a responsibility to not think that you are better than everybody else, or that because you're the one with the ideas or you're the one that's leading or you're the one that's trailblazing, that actually that makes you more important. Because it's about using the gift that God's given you in the context that he's given you, appreciating that it's not just your gift that matters, it's everybody else's as well. And again, I've seen it, you know, where there are leaders within churches who not necessarily a lead in the church, but have a leadership gift. And they somehow think that they're the best thing since sliced bread and, you know, don't just disregard other people and what they bring, thinking that they're more important. And so I do think that we have a responsibility as well to bring our gift, knowing that it sits alongside other people's gifts, that there's nothing that's more important than anybody else, and that we're part of the body of Christ, you know, and where we might be an arm, there's somebody else that's a foot, and there's somebody else that's the head, and there's somebody else that's the shoulder, and actually it takes everything to work together.
Yeah, I think I used the word earlier, but the challenge and the weakness and vulnerability of an entrepreneur and a pioneer could be they become maverick.
Yeah.
You know, that their confidence turns into arrogance.
Yeah.
That's not good and that's not right. And every pioneer and every entrepreneur still needs to be rooted in a local church and still, even though I'm not about control, but a great leader still has to operate submission.
Yeah, and accountability. But
you know, submission only takes place when you disagree. So if your husband, Gemma, agrees with you all the time, what a wonderful marriage that must be. But, all I'm saying is it's only when, in a marriage, when you disagree, you've got to submit.
Yeah.
If you agree all the time, submission's not needed.
Right.
Because we agree.
Right.
And so, if we're just trying to get
very wise,
agreement.
that.
Thank you. Well, I had a cheese sandwich for lunch and it's just but the point would be is it's really important that submission takes place. But it takes place without either the leader trying to control the entrepreneur or the entrepreneur just going, I don't trust that leader, so I ain't going to submit. It don't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because God works in mutual submission.
Yeah.
He does in marriage. He does in leadership. But the problem is when we get someone to submit to us, and the same often in marriage, we take advantage of that in the word control.
Right.
Yeah.
And that then fails. So I think, those things have gone on in church too long. And of course, in the middle of it to work, it's called trust. It's trust.
Yeah.
And so, if I've got a really good friend, the Bible says faithful wounds of a friend. What does that actually mean? It means a friend who will tell me the truth. It might hurt me, but I'm going to listen because I trust them.
Yeah.
Not everybody that tells me the truth is my friend. So I might not trust them.
Mm-hmm.
But the relationship that an entrepreneur and pioneer needs, he needs or she needs that relationship. And the pastor needs them or the leader, whatever. And it's kind of like, so trust has got to be in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I remember a minister once saying, vision can only go as far as trust allows it. And so we can't get away without trusting, as in a marriage, as in a close relationship. But we don't want mavericks.
Yeah.
We want submitted entrepreneurs, not controlled entrepreneurs. And so there's both leader and entrepreneur that has to come together and go, we can do something great in this city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can compliment you, you can compliment me, but we're not going to compete.
Yeah,
Really
so
important.
really we need church leaders to be more open-minded and to think of how they can use the entrepreneurs that are sitting in their pews.
Yeah.
And so what advice would you give? Being a church leader, what advice would you give to somebody else who is a church leader? How do you approach that?
Well, firstly, church leaders have said to me many times, when I was pastoring, they said, you've got some really strong people in your church and you've got some business people, and you've got some pioneers, I haven't got anybody. That's what they'd say. And I disagree. I think every church, has got someone.
Yeah.
And they need to breathe, as Shell was saying earlier, they need to breathe into those people. Go and have a coffee, hear their heart. What do they want to do? Okay, they might want to set up a business. That's all fine. Encourage that business. But also, like I would do, what's the kingdom on that business?
Mm-hmm.
What's the God purpose on that business?
Yeah.
Is it just to get wealthy yourself? Well, God calls us to be a river, not a reservoir. So what's going to flow into you and flow out of you? Now, I believe we can be blessed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against us being blessed. But if the whole end game is for just me to be blessed, that's pretty self-seeking.
Yeah.
That's pretty selfish. And that's not the God pattern. So the point is, a leader has to say, if you're successful there, what's real success? And I've challenged business people this way, very wealthy people. And I've said, okay, you're successful there, but what's the kingdom reason for this? What's God put on you that you may change something for his glory and for the whole eternity?
Yeah.
And I think, you have to have a bit of confidence with that. I agree as a leader, but it starts with a conversation and a coffee.
Yeah. That's really
And
good.
I think that's where, the starting point right now for leaders listening, going, well, I may have two people, go and get a coffee with them and ask with them, what is the God mark that you want to see achieved in your business, your organisation, and then pray into it and let's see how we can partner.
Yeah, that's really good. And on the other side, Shell, what would you say to entrepreneurs who feel like they're in a church that just does not get them? What would your advice be to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky, because you either stick with it or you find somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's been my experience.
Right.
You can stick in a church where, it feels like it's a constant battle, and actually there's bitterness and there's all kinds of different things that creep in at that point. There was for me. Or you find a church where you feel like, actually, this is a place that I can be who God's created me to be.
Yeah.
And I was thinking when Gary was giving that answer that pioneers tend to attract pioneers and leaders tend to attract leaders. If your natural disposition as a church leader is pastor teacher, and that apostle, prophetic, evangelist thing is missing, find people who have got those gifts, because they're the ones that will attract the pioneers. They're the ones that will attract the leaders. They're the ones that will attract the entrepreneurs. And equally, I think it's important that we have everybody. We don't want a church full of pastors or just teachers or just prophets or just evangelists or just apostles, because it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It's a fivefold ministry, because actually it takes all five
to work.
Types to be there.
Yeah, the input.
So yeah, I mean, that's a choice that you've got to make personally, really. I know for me, it was, it cost. It cost to make that decision.
Yeah.
It ended up that, our whole family moved location. The kids moved schools. Jobs were changed. It was a costly decision. But it was one that we felt we were in a stage of life where we had to make it.
Right.
Because otherwise, I felt like I was spiritually dying.
Right.
Not because I am reliant on, teaching on a Sunday morning or anything like that, but just because I felt like I was in a place where I was spiritually dying. I couldn't have that.
Yeah.
I think for people listening, if they're in a church right now and it's not working, work at it.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you pursue conversation with the leader.
Yeah.
Don't wait for the leader.
Yeah.
And, don't leave. If you've got to leave, and sometimes that is the case, don't leave with an argument. Leave with peace.
Right.
Because the way you leave is the way you enter.
Yeah.
And too many people leave with an argument in church. And where possible, don't leave with an argument. That's my thing.
Yeah.
Because I think that's really important. And also the pastor and leader needs to remember, entrepreneurs and pioneers can get very lonely. So don't preach it on, be a friend.
Yeah.
And I think you'd be surprised how many you'll win.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Yeah, that's great advice.
The other thing that I would say as well is that just because as an entrepreneur or a pioneer, you do feel like, the church that you're in maybe isn't the right church for you, doesn't mean that it's a bad church.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it's not a church that's working. It just, like Gary said, it's important that you make that decision. And if the decision is that you need to move somewhere else, then, leave well. But honour people kind of in that. Don't make it all about you and what you need. Make the right decision for you and for your family and what God's asking you to do. Because maybe God's asking you to be part of that church because you're that entrepreneur and leader that's going to bring other people in.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of, it's not a black and white answer. It's not a yes or no thing. I think it's just really praying and asking God, where do you want me to be?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do in this situation? And just make sure that whatever it is, whatever decision you make, that you're honouring people, that you're, like Gary said, leaving well, and that you're doing ultimately what God wants you to do.
And the great things about the Lions course is obviously that you can come alongside both the church and the entrepreneur, and you can support both, can't you, on that journey?
That's what we want to do, and
Yeah.
that's what we endeavour to do. I think sometimes, churches could even get suspicious of us, but as Shell said at the beginning, everyone that comes on the Lions delegates needs to be grounded in the church, and we look for a reference from the church pastor. And that's really important to us because we know God's heart is in local church. So anything we said today is not negative towards local church. We want to roar it on, we want to cheer it on, and we want to cheer people that God places in those churches on as well. Yeah. And then we can see a great partnership for the future and maybe a start of a revival and reformation.
Yeah. And it's one final point before we finish. You guys also run a project for church leaders, don't you?
Yeah.
So tell us just quickly about that.
Yeah, we run a called Strengthen, and that has just started last year, where we pull leaders and their spouses together for a 2-day, one night over stay, where really we're inviting from all streams and denominations, those that may have stagnated, have plateaued, and maybe just say, I don't know how to go to the next level. And also sometimes just isolated, even leaders, you know. And so this is where we pull them together 4 times a year in a nice hotel. And a number of us just teach, share. It's not a teaching conference, it's a sharing conference, it's life. We want to build into people's lives and hear their journey and really pray into that and release them. So yeah, we just finished our first year last year. Now we've got a second year starting. So we've got, nearly 40 leaders in the room now.
Yeah, great.
Just really cheering on. And so if we can do our little bit,
Yeah.
then that's great.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, you two. You've been absolutely brilliant. And it's been an interesting chat, hasn't it, about the church and entrepreneurship and how they can work together, and it could be really successful. I hope it's made you think today. I hope it's inspired you. Please do share this podcast, because we would love more Christian entrepreneurs to be watching and to be inspired by the Lions Roar podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.